Armchair Adventure Book Club. I'm Jennifer Pharr Davis, and today we have one of my favorite authors, Kara Richardson Whitely. And I do remember one time I was visiting with Kara up in New Jersey, and we were on her front porch actually. And I asked her, I said, now tell me, how do I say your name? Is it Kara or is it Kara? And she kept saying her name, and I kept repeating it, and she said, no. No, it's not right. And at one point she said, basically, you can only say my name correctly if you're from New Jersey. So I was hoping you could say your name so that everyone would hear it and that I wouldn't just butcher it the entire time.
Okay, it's Kara Richardson Whitely.
Okay, I'm going to keep working on my New Jersey accent for that. And I've been fortunate to know Kara for several years now. We're both adventurers, both authors, both moms. And I feel like it's a really rare thing to read someone's book and you get this perception of who they are, and usually it's very positive. And then you get to know that person, and a lot of times you see the cracks or you see the flaws, or all of a sudden your idea of that person, it changes. And while my concept of who Kara is has certainly gone deeper since we've become friends, it's one of those experiences where I've just kind of fallen more and more in love with her, and she's like one of my personal heroes. So it's a real treat for me to have her here today, and we're going to discuss her life and her writing and her work, and especially her book, which is called Gorge, My Journey Up Kilimanjaro at 300 Pounds. So Kara, to start it off, maybe we could talk about what drew you to Kilimanjaro? Like, why was that the mountain that spoke to your soul that you wanted to climb?
Sure. Well, the first time I've climbed Kilimanjaro 3 different times, and the first time that it really drew my attention was because it's the highest mountain that you can hike to the top of without it being a technical climb. So it's 19,343 feet. And it was a mountain that, while arduous and 5.5 days up, 1.5 days down adventure, all without a shower. So not for everybody, right? But it was something that felt hard, horribly difficult, but at the same time doable if I just put one foot in front of the other.
And you are what you consider to be a plus size adventurer. On all of your treks up Kilimanjaro, you were above the 200-pound mark, and twice you were around 300 pounds when you went to the mountain. And it's so interesting to me, you sharing your story, because being in the outdoor world right now, we hear a lot of buzz about it needing to be more inclusive. And usually it's in regard to racial background, socioeconomics, gender, sexual orientation, and very rarely do we hear the idea of outdoors being inclusive, applying to people of different sizes and different weights. So what has been your experience being a plus-sized adventurer?
Well, I think that one of the biggest parts of my own journey has been about me feeling comfortable in the skin that I'm in, and to do the things that bring me the most passion, and that I feel that I value the most. And one of those things is to be in the outdoors and to hike. Well, I have to be able to do that in the body that I'm in. And no matter where I am on the scale, and then that's not the important thing. The important thing is that I do something that I truly value. And so much has changed since the first time I climbed Kilimanjaro in 2007. Back then, there weren't as many options in the extended sizes realm. But when I was training or when I was in Colorado just in January, an outdoor retailer, this is something that I was just astounded by how much the world has changed around extended sizes, about how much people have really come to learn that, extended sizing is a massive part of the marketplace, and there's a place for all of us to fit in. So really, I mean, when you first start hiking, and not only do you look like you don't belong on the trail, or at least you perceive that people think of you that way, to going to now having more acceptance has been a wonderful step forward.
So just a very specific question, like if you are someone who's plus sized and you want to get into hiking or backpacking or trail running or whatever it is, like where should you go to find gear and to find clothing that fits you and that is comfortable?
That's a great question, and it depends on what level of hiking that you're going, for. But I mean, there are so many different companies that are exploring extended sizes, but I'd say my go-to over the years has been Columbia. They've had it for a long time, but I've heard even places like the North Face are exploring it. I've heard Cool has some great stuff. I haven't tried it yet. And then, places like LL Bean, they've had extended sizes for a long time. And I just find that with each, season of outdoors clothes, there's just a whole new batch of offerings, which is exciting and fun. So it does take some looking in, but the other thing that you want to think about are the ways to support yourself on the trail. So for example, hiking poles and great boots, so it's not just so much about the clothing that you wear, but also the supportive stuff that you get as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think of you and I don't think of your weight. I think Kara, she's an author, she's an adventurer, she's hiked Kilimanjaro. We're both moms. Like there's so much we connect on. And yet it's interesting because in your story, weight is such a big part of it because of the obstacles you face due to it. Not only like, well, where do I find my clothing? How is gear different for me on the mountain? And then even your treatment on the mountain was different because of your size. And you had a really interesting interaction at one point with your African guides at Kilimanjaro. And I was wondering if you could share some of the struggles just relationally you had with your guides going up the mountain because of your weight.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that when I climbed Kilimanjaro the third time, I did it from the point of view that it wouldn't matter if I lost a single pound, that I was going to just try it as I was. Obviously, I was going to train. I was going to work really hard to get ready to climb the mountain, but it wasn't about the weight anymore. I needed to learn to love myself where I was and go from there. But doing that meant that I was going to put in the work to physically be able to get up the mountain. I walked a half marathon. I did boot camp. I walked up the ski trails in Telluride, Colorado, which is really, really hard because you're in high altitude there too. So I felt really, really ready to climb that third time. In fact, I think that second day on the mountain, I was feeling better than I did on both of the climbs before that. So when I went to bed that night after 10 hours of hiking, I was feeling really tired, as most people would be legit tired after 10 hours of hiking. And I heard the porters and guides talking about, in the next tent, they were talking about me. And it wasn't just me feeling self-conscious about myself, because I know that people can feel self-conscious about themselves, but they were using my Swahili nickname, which is Mama Kubwa, which means big woman. That's what they've always called me on Kilimanjaro. And so that night, I mean, it's so easy, over the years, I've struggled with binge eating disorder, anxiety, and depression, and they all really dovetail in with each other. And so it is so easy for me to go from someone who's like, yeah, I'm climbing Africa's highest peak, one of the 7 summits, and I've got this, and I feel so good, to hearing the porters and guides making fun of me in the next tent and have it all just absolutely crumble. So I'm thinking to myself, how can I get off this mountain? Nobody's going to miss me if I'm gone. Like, I don't know what I was thinking, because I've climbed the mountain 3 times. I knew how to get back down. I don't know what my plan would be once I got to like the gate, because there's not like an Uber or something that could have taken me to the airport. But, finally I went to sleep thinking that like, okay, I'm going to be all right. I feel strong. But the thing about the mountain is that, you have to deal with things as they come. It's the same thing that I've learned in my own recovery from binge eating disorder is, if it's cold on Kilimanjaro, you need a jacket. If you're thirsty, you need to drink. And if something is bothering you, you need to deal with it immediately. And so that next day on the trail, I felt like this was still with me, this thought that these people who I was asking to help me up the mountain didn't believe that I could. And so I could tell it wasn't just the altitude, but everything about what I was doing was clumsy. My steps were clumsy. I felt sick every time I made some kind of move on the mountain, whether I was, negotiating some kind of rock formation or whatever. I had so much more crushing doubt that finally at this moment where we had a break, I took the head guide aside and I said, hey, I heard you talking about me. What were you saying? And he said, well, the porters and guides, they don't believe that you're going to make it to the top. And I said, well, what did you say? Did you make any bets? Because you should bet on me, And I think that's not a testament to just this like uber self-confidence that one gets, but my own journey to recovery and the strength that I've earned, kind of gained, not in the physical training, but the emotional work of working with an eating disorder specialist and really working through how to deal with the stress of life and how to stand in one's strength and how to stand up for myself has been one of the most important lessons and things that I carry with me off the trail.
Yeah, that scene really was powerful, and it spoke to me and was an inspiration for me, and also sort of gave me these regrets because, well, it dug up regrets. I hiked Kilimanjaro in 2006, and it's interesting because your group, you had 4 females and all male guides and porters, and my trip was very male dominant as far as our support as well. And my last day going up to the summit, one of the guides, I remember he was grabbing my butt and making sexually explicit comments to me. And the thing is, in your right mind in the moment, like now looking back, I'm like, I need to address it. I need to turn. I need to create healthy boundaries. And it is so hard to stand up for yourself or know the right thing to do when you don't have oxygen going to your brain. And so I just,
True.
you're thinking, I've worked so hard to get here. I've invested money, I've invested training. This is my dream. And now this person who, like you said, you've asked for their help and you're counting on them to get you to the top. It seems like they might not be giving you the support you need, and they might make it harder for you. And one reason I bring that up is because, your story and your climb up Kilimanjaro and dealing with binge eating disorder, like you use the mountain as this beautiful metaphor for all the times you've had to stand up for yourself in life and all the hardships that you've had to go through. And in your book, you're very vulnerable and you share how a lot of your binge eating disorder probably started in your childhood. And you had a lot of traumatic experiences in your childhood. And the thing that stood out to me is they're not that uncommon either. Like you were sexually harassed as a child, and you had daddy issues that a lot of people have, and came from a broken home. And I was just wondering how that experience impacted you and maybe started this binge eating disorder, but also how you learned to stand up for yourself and be resilient through those experiences.
Right. Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I think that what's important to know about any eating disorder is that this isn't just something that you just get, and there's a lot of working parts to it. And so there are some genetic dispositions, there's some environmental dispositions, there's all sorts of things that kind of add up to like, this is the coping mechanism for this person. And so for me, it was kind of a perfect storm of all these things: a sexual assault when I was 12 years old, and, parents divorced, financial insecurities, and all these other things like that. And so, but as it comes to my recovery, these many years later, it's all about what I like to kind of boil it down to is that from those points in my childhood where I started to turn to food as the way that I got through things, I almost missed that whole part of learning to deal with the stress of life, because, you know, in the beginning, it would be easy to say that, you know, food saved me. You know, that's the way that I interpreted it, right? When my parents were fighting, I'd hide in the pantry. When I was sexually assaulted, I literally got up and offered the guy something to eat. But now it's like, you know, that means that because I wasn't able to sit in the good and the bad and all the other things in between, it meant that I wasn't able to have that, the ability to cope with those things. And so as an adult, it's even an ongoing thing right now. I mean, gosh, so right now we're in such an unprecedented time, and the highs are so high and the lows are so low, that you kind of have to learn to be in both places, right? I mean, even the other day, you know, I had this amazing session with the screenwriter of Gorge. We spoke for 2 hours, and I got a speaking engagement. You know, of course it's virtual, but, you know, I was happy that, you know, suddenly people are opening up opportunities for me again, right? And I was feeling elated, on top of the world. And I come downstairs and I learned that my daughter's camp is canceled. You know, something she was so looking forward to. And my neighbor's mother passed away from the coronavirus, and her father's sick with it. And so it's like, you have these just amazing shifts in life. And I'm not sure if this actually answers your question, but like the idea is that it's not just coasting along. Life is not coasting along. And I've had to learn that there's just such a discrepancy between the highs and the lows. And that's really the lesson of the mountain, is that how do you get through that point where you don't know how bad or how hard a trail is going to be, and yet you continue to keep moving, right? Because if you keep moving on a trail, whether you're on Kilimanjaro or in your own backyard or wherever you can hike these days, you're going to see the most beautiful and amazing, wonderful things about life. But if you're constantly pushing it away, you're going to miss it, right? So there have been great things about, I mean, there have been horrible things about this epidemic, horrible, terrible, but there have been some good things too, you know?
Yeah. I'm wondering, many times now you've mentioned recovery, and, you know, and your book, Climbing Up Kilimanjaro, seemed like such an important part to just claiming your self-worth and your power, and saying, I can do this, I can do hard things, I can do things that other people don't think I can do. I'm not going to let other people's perception of me define my life and my outcome. But I'm interested how you define recovery, and how at this point you define health, because I'm guessing it's not a certain number on the scale. So I just want to know, at this point, what makes you feel healthy, and how do you define recovery? Oh,
I
Kara.
lost you for a second
There you
there.
are. There you are.
So the last thing I heard was, how do I define recovery and health? And for me, it's about you know, first, of course, it was kind of getting to the bottom and understanding the narrative of why I did what I did. And what I mean by why I did what I did, why I turned to food when I was really struggling, right? That was the first part. The second is then learning to have the life skills of to deal with life as it comes, right? And so that it's not about eat less, move more. I mean, so none of my life is about eat less, move more. There's sure a lot of movement, right? I mean, I every day I walk, or I do some kind of activity that just burns off some of the anxiety and stress of this very, very, very interesting moment in our lives. But it's about kind of finding and relearning and being able to rework the skills, rework my own lessons of life at different points, if that makes any sense. So you and I have something in common, in that your book was just re-released after 10 years, right? And my book is being made into a movie. And so it's almost like we have to constantly, you and I are like retreading our past often, right? We talk about the things that we've been through over and over again. But for me, there's something really healing about that. I mean, I serve as a binge eating disorder recovery advocate for Eating Recovery Center. And that role is wonderful because it builds compassion and understanding about binge eating disorder for other people, right? And in that, people don't feel alone. And in that, someone who's like me might hear a story, part of my story, and they might relate to that, and they might think like, gosh, this is the most common yet least understood eating disorder out there. But more importantly for me personally is that sharing my story openly and honestly again and again is one of the most healing things that I can do for myself. Because with binge eating disorder, there was so much locked in the shame and the secrecy of it, because a lot of people who I knew and loved would be like, well, I've seen you eat. You eat healthy things. And what they didn't realize was that a lot of the food that I was consuming was all, in secret and without people knowing about it. And so what I hope to do and what I define for health and recovery is about, not being in the dark about when I'm struggling, so if there is a low moment, and there've been plenty of them in the last several weeks of coronavirus even, that I reach out to people who I care about and, who are willing to listen in a way that helps me. And same thing for other people. I'm here to listen for someone who might be really struggling, because that's what health and wellness is to me. It's about moving so that I can constantly hike and whenever I feel like it, that I'm training for bigger things. I did Havasu Canyon last spring, and with this current situation, the long trail hike might have to be pushed to another year, but that doesn't mean I'm not moving. I move to burn off stress. I move to feel active in my body. I don't move as like a weight loss thing. It's more about taking care of myself and taking myself to the places I want to be.
I really consider you to be like your gift is your openness, and I consider you to be so brave in everything that you're willing to share. And it just made me wonder, because in your book you talk a lot about the insecurities you had on the mountain, right? Like, okay, the guides don't think I'm going to make it. Okay, are my pants going to fit? What if my water freezes? What if this was all a mistake? And I'm wondering what insecurities you face then as a writer or a speaker going around and sharing these stories, and what tools you use to get through both. Like, what's similar for you when, as a human, you're struggling with these self-doubts? Like, what do you tell yourself to get through those moments on the trail or on the stage or when you're writing or just at home with your family?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. But first, I just want to acknowledge that I think of you the same way. I feel as you're brave. You're one of my massive heroines in this world, of like all the things that you've done and all the things that you've set for other people to follow. It's pretty awesome. So I think that what I tell myself when I'm struggling is, I think, again, it kind of goes back to the things like the building blocks that I've had to learn in therapy with an eating disorder specialist, and taking the time to work through what's the truth of a situation, right? Because my own mind will defeat me before I ever set foot on any goal, whether it's on a trail or on the page, right? There are days when I sit in my office and tell myself that nobody wants to hear this. Why are you bothering? You don't want to email that person right now. But I have to kind of push through and realize why it's so important to share that. And that the more that I share, the more other people will know that they're not alone. And, a lot of people have come to Gorge, my journey of Kilimanjaro at 300 pounds, without any kind of concerns about weight or shape. It's more about just feeling like they're not living in the now. And I think a lot of the story and why Amazon Studios is developing it into a movie is that that's what the story is about. So many of us have so many different things that are in the way of what we want to do and where we want to live and how we want to be and all these other things, like as if we're supposed to have the perfect timing for everything. And so it's really important for me, even when my brain tries to shut me down or shut an idea down, is to kind of sit back and assess in the same way that I would have done in my therapist's office. Check the facts. Is this true? Is this thought true? And why is it important? Why is it important to me? Why is it going to be important to other people? And, but at the same time, also giving myself permission, especially during this time of coronavirus, of knowing that there's going to be ebbs and flows of my creativity, ebbs and flows of my energy level. Because I've read a lot of stories about how even Zooming is exhausting and quarantine is exhausting and homeschool is super exhausting. So many things of this process it's really hard. And so I think the other part of it is kind of just acknowledging and giving myself permission to just be in this moment and knowing that this moment is hard, and that's okay too.
Yeah, that's really great advice. And I just want to echo, like, you and I have had very, very different trail adventures. And I was just amazed reading Gorge, like how similar the mindset was for both of us. Like so much of what you went through were things that I also went through on the trail, and feeling like in some ways the odds were stacked against me, but then also we both in different ways expressed this gratitude that when we were on the trail and on the mountain, the environment didn't care. Like there's all this public perception and expectations of what we can and what we could do. And then when you're on the mountain or on the trail, it's just about putting one foot in front of the other.
Exactly.
And there's a real freedom to that. And I love that. I was sort of saving it to the end because it's just such a, exciting announcement, but you've already referenced it a couple times. So why don't we go ahead and dive in? And if you have questions for Kara, go ahead and ask those too. We definitely want to bring in audience questions. But as you said, your story has lived on and gotten new legs, and now it has a new opportunity to reach more people and inspire more people. So why don't you tell us more about that, more about the movie, how it happened? I love the story of how it happened and what your role with the movie is going to be.
Sure. Well, the exciting news that was just announced right before the holidays is that Amazon Studios has optioned Gorge, meaning that they're planning to make it into a major motion picture. And Chrissy Metz, who plays Kate in This Is Us, is one of the producers on the project, along with Denise Denovi's company, Patma, with Margaret French, and all these amazing, amazing people working on this project. And it's a female-led team, which I love, because on the topic of body image, I think that that's going to be a nice tone to set. I think that people are going to be drawing a lot of their own personal experience into the project. And so I just spent, like I said, a couple hours talking with Pamela Gray, who's the screenwriter on it. And I'd been hoping, and I think a lot of authors hope that their stories will be made into a movie. And so there were a couple of years where I was trying to figure out how are we gonna go about and do this. And what I ended up doing was that, I've admired Chrissy Metz for so long, and her role as Kate on This Is Us has touched me in ways that I think few other roles have. I mean, especially because, she's playing someone on a dramatic television show where she's not the punchline. Somebody who's in a larger body is not the punchline. And that was really important to me. And so I wanted to meet her at her New York book signing. And I just felt compelled to give her a copy of Gorge. And so when she signed my book, I slid my book across the table, and lo and behold, at that very moment, her co-star Mandy Moore was on Kilimanjaro at that exact time. So, she was like, oh, that's interesting. But she was really busy with Breakthrough, and which is an amazing movie about a true story as well. So she kind of forgot about it for a little while, and I had forgotten that I even gave her a copy of the book. I thought that it ended up in the recycling bin or something, but apparently that summer, so that was March 2 years ago, and that summer she woke from the middle of a dream going, I need to read Gorge. And she did. She read it in a day, and then apparently it took her like a month or something to write just the perfect email to me. I mean, she really would have had me at hello. It was one of the most beautiful emails I've ever received about Gorge. And it showed me that she understood it, from her own human experience, but also that she really valued this story and wanted to bring it to life in a way that would mean something to people. And every step of this journey has felt that way, that not only Chrissy, but everybody involved in the project has had such care and compassion, because I think that this is the first time that, we're willing to talk openly about issues of mental health and binge eating disorder, and knowing that this story is going to be resounding with people in ways that it hasn't before. But I think it's because we're ready to talk about it. I mean, the book came out, many years ago, and so just now it's getting a new life, because I think the conversation has carried so far. Like we were talking about plus size, extended sizes in gear, and the show This Is Us and its popularity. I mean, that wasn't out when Gorge first came out, and so I think the nation, the world is ready to talk about that.
So it really seems like everyone just has this amazing energy behind the movie, and just are coming from a place of really supporting your story and your vision. But someone, Myrna, another kind of hero, asked, do you have any fears that your story is going to be changed drastically or manipulated?
Well, there will be, in some ways, I'm not worried, because I feel like this team is really behind me and wants to share the authenticity of this story. And, but I do know that there will be some story things that will be done to change, to be able to tell the story on a screen. And so I've had to come to accept that. There are certain things that we've talked about as sacred, but there are other things that we might need to shift and change in the storyline, but that won't take away from the message of the piece. And so I don't think they're suddenly going to make me go up Everest or something like that. But it has been an interesting part of the process to see where other people have thought about it. Like there was one studio who wanted to, instead of me climbing the mountain 3 times, they wanted it to be me climbing the mountain 1 time. And so that shows to me that it would have been the very traditional Hollywood model of the before and after picture. And I think that in everything that I do, it's so against that idea that we're some kind of before and after picture. I mean, that's the diet mentality that is out there so much, and it's really, I think, hurting people who are in my shoes of, an eating disorder. Life isn't about before and after pictures. It's about the journey, and it's about where you are at this moment, and where you want to go from here. And so I'm grateful that particular studio didn't work out, whereas Amazon is, much more about telling the whole story. And who knows, again, how it's going to shape onto film. But I mean, I think that's where some other movies have tried to tell not a similar story, but they've fallen flat because they've just kind of picked up and ran with that idea that it's all about, here's her before, here's her after, and look at how perfect she is now, because we're all perfectly imperfect.
Right. Yeah. The happily ever after, right? Mm-hmm. My daughter for homeschool the other day, she had to write realistic fiction, and her last sentence was, and they lived happily ever after. And I was like, do you think that's realistic? So yeah, I think getting away from that narrative is super important. Another great question we have from our audience is from someone, this is very specific, but she says, I have a mother and sister who are obese, and they struggle with joint pain when exercising and breathing. And they want to know if you have, which I remember in your book, you mentioned a couple, but they wanted to know if you had a mindset, a mantra, or a practice that helped you get through the moments of doubt in your physical body.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that first of all, the question about, just mentioning that they're obese, and I think it's more important to focus on not the weight, but the behavior. I mean, that's something that I've really learned, especially, in my work with Eating Recovery Center. It's never about the weight, it's about the behavior. And so, even if I was at my highest weight, or how do I say, even if I was at my lowest weight, if I was hiding and replacing food, then that would be a red flag, right, for people to see about me. So it's more about the behavior. And if it's something that they love to do, if there is something that they love to do, then I would say, work with a medical professional to come up with a plan about how to embrace those activities that feel really good for them, right? So if it's being in the pool and swimming, that's something really great for if you struggle with joint issues. Hiking with hiking poles, if that feels good. Starting, where you are and going from there is the most important thing. It's not, down the road, obviously I came up with the goal of Kilimanjaro, but I certainly didn't start there. My first huge goal was, Watchung Reservation, which is a hiking trail. I mean, like, this was like the Orange Trail, like at the 20-minute trail. I was suited up like I was going up Everest, but, it was all about starting. And so whatever activities, your family members love to do, then start there, start in a place of joy. And, you should never take up jogging because you read something that says that you should jog. You should jog if you love to jog. You should do Zumba if you love to move that way. But there's lots of ways to start small, but just start where you are and just really follow the passion of it.
Awesome. I'm gonna add on to another question here, which is so good because someone asked, okay, well, how is your life different since your third hike up Kilimanjaro, which the book Gorge is about? And I also want to know, because so much of your journey is about learning how to care for yourself and learning how to, like you said, keep moving, incorporate physical activity and reduce stress. But I also know I won't fill in all your life details of the past few years, but you're a mom of 3. You have a marriage, you have a career that's really taking off. And it seems like now you almost have more pressures and more responsibilities than ever before. So when you update us on your life and everything that's going on now and how it's changed since your last hike up Kili, I just wonder if you could also speak to like how you carve out time to take care of yourself.
Well, today I took a shower and put on makeup. So win.
Yeah.
No, I think that my journey forward since Kilimanjaro is about these victories at sea level. So that means that I focus on, the resiliency that it taught me to get through these kinds of times. It makes me think about, it's such an interesting mirror now being a mom. I've got 3 kids, ages 12, 7, so same age as Charlie. Emily and Charlie were born a day apart from each other, but Jennifer's daughter. Anyway, so, and then I've got Elliot, who's 4. And so now it's about seeing, there's just this really powerful thing about having a child who's 12, and 12 was the year when I was sexually assaulted, and so I've seen her as I was as a kid, and in many ways having this mirror and like being able to see myself at that age, because my oldest daughter Anna and I look very similar, as I look like her as a kid, and almost seeing how vulnerable I was. And so it's this really rare opportunity to forgive myself for turning to food when I did. right? It doesn't mean that it's right or the best thing that I could have done or anything like that. It's almost like it's just a really powerful thing to work through with my own therapist, about just being like, wow, that was a really hard time. But then it's also about kind of setting up building blocks for them so that they can deal with the stress of life as well. And so it's like getting special bath bombs so they can relax, and every evening we have tea as a way of kind of just letting down letting go of the day and just easing into it. And so a lot of the things that I do for myself, like taking time to go for a walk and making sure that's part of my schedule, is making sure that my kids are all doing the same thing too, and that my husband has time to take care of himself. And so we're all making sure that we're carving time to do the work that we need to do, for them to do their homeschooling, for me to work on these projects. And so we all are, this intertwined team to help each other achieve our goals. And so I think that's what's different about life before Kilimanjaro and life after Kilimanjaro. Before, it was like living in a lot of resentment and anger about my past. And now it's about the compassion and understanding of what I went through at the time, what I need to have to get to where I want to go, whether it's my goals on the movie or my goals on the trail or just my goals as a mom. So I think that there's a real intertwined nature of all of that just plays into us each having time and knowing that we're all worth the time to do those things. And that's been a really big lesson of Kilimanjaro.
That's awesome. I know that speaks to me, and it speaks, I'm sure, to a lot of folks out there. As we wrap up today, is there anything else you want to tell us about that's going on, maybe future plans or goals? Or is there any advice that you want to leave with everyone before we wrap up our book club today?
Gosh, I'm doing a lot of writing for Eating Recovery Center these days. I think one of the mixed blessings of this quarantine is that I'm forced up to this attic office, which you can't see because you just see these beautiful northern lights. But it's a bit like a bat cave. It's kind of like a 17th century French with cracked walls and a really good draft coming in through the windows. Anyway, so I've been doing a lot more writing, and so there's going to be a really cool, not cool, but interesting blog coming out about how to live with a stockpile of food in your house, and how I've kind of had to work around that relationship, especially if you struggle with an eating disorder. That's an interesting thing. I think that's going to be posted today or shortly thereafter. And so in many ways, this mixed blessing of this time is me having to sit with and understand understand my relationship with my food and my body in these circumstances, right? And so I think that's really exciting stuff that's coming up. And as far as hiking and getting back to life as normal, I mean, who knows what's coming down the pipeline. But I do know that fortunately, Amazon's doing well. I'm probably, funding the movie all by myself with all my orders that I'm making on Amazon. And everything's moving ahead as far as I know. And it probably will be a couple years down the pipeline that the movie will actually be out. So that's just something that I'm clinging on to hope. But I'm just so grateful at this time. And, I live a couple blocks away from a hospital. And so I know that so much is going on there, and I'm so grateful to all the people who are keeping us afloat right now. And so I think it's important during this time, especially, that I live in a space of not woe is me and oh, look at my past and look at how difficult this is, but in a space of gratitude that, we're healthy, and because of the people who are in the front lines, from grocery delivery people to, UPS drivers, to all those people working at the hospital, and those people who are fighting through COVID-19 now. I mean, we're just really grateful that they're there, and that somehow we're all going to get through this.
Well, I am grateful that you are here, that you are there. And I would encourage everyone to follow Kara and keep up with her story, because I promise you, she will continue to offer inspiration. And you can find her. She has a website, KaraRichardsonWhitely.com. You can find her on social under her name too, Kara Richardson Whitely. Yay, 3-name, long name.
Yeah, Jennifer.
Amelia. So you can look her up there. Her blog and other helpful resources for people struggling with eating disorders can be found at the Eating Recovery Center. You can look that up there on social media and have a website as well. Kara and I connected originally through the American Hiking Society, so I want to give a shout out to them because they're an awesome organization. And then of course we're streaming through the Appalachian Trail Conservancy Facebook page today, which is a trail that runs through both of our backyards in North Carolina and New Jersey. Not literal backyards, but
No. Life would be really cool if it did.
I know. I agree. I could hike to come see you. It'd be awesome.
Yeah.
But I really encourage you, again, this is not just a story of someone who has struggled with a binge eating disorder, Gorge. And it's not just a story about climbing up a mountain. It is just such a powerful book about, living without regrets and doing things that are challenging and finding self-belief inside yourself. And no matter who you are, you will relate to it. So I highly recommend Gorge. We have author signed copies. Kara was generous enough to send us a couple books of boxes of author signed books, and you can get those at www.blueridgehikingco.com. All of our authors on the Armchair Adventure Book Club have author signed copies at the website, so blueridgehikingco.com. I encourage you to check that out. And this has been our fourth book in a row. We've all been reading a lot with the Armchair Adventure Book Club. So next week we're going to take a break. We're going to have a short film that we're releasing called Positive Forward Motion. So join us next week. We'll discuss that with the filmmaker, Chris Galloway, and then we'll get back to books the following week. But Kara, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for writing. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being you. We are all so grateful and can't wait to follow along with your upcoming adventures.
Thank you so much. This has been so much fun.
Okay. Bye, you guys.
Bye. Happy trails.